know that you are not very in your best situation, but still thank you very much for stick to our date today. And during this dialogue, if you feel any needs, or we can always adjust according to the current situation. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much. And actually, we have another host today for today's intergenerational dialogue. Miss Lauren Li Lingyun. She's not the first time here to meet Judy and talk to you, because she's the AWLP participant last year. So she's here hosting today's session as the previous alumni. So let's welcome Miss Lauren Li Lingyun.
Hello, Lauren.
Hi, good evening. I think it's from New York. Good morning, ladies, and good evening, Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins, and welcome to today's session. My name is Ling Yun. You're also welcome to call me by my English name, Lauren. Allow me to give a brief introduction of myself. I'm now a senior student from Shanghai International Studies University, School of International Relations and Public Affairs. And I've also got the conditional offer from the Yanqing Academy of Peking University, where I will continue my study in the China study programs there. And
where?
Certainly, Peking University.
Oh, good. Okay.
And last but certainly not least, I am an alumna of 2021 Asian Women Leadership Program. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here as a moderator for this morning's session. And now, ladies, allow me to introduce our guest speaker here today, Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins. So Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins was appointed UN Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support in April 2009. Before taking up this position, she had a long UN career spanning over 30 years covering development and humanitarian work with UNDP, the World Food Programme, and the High Commissioner for Refugees. She held various positions in UNDP, which included 10 years in Eastern and Southern Africa, 8 years in WFP, where she was responsible for the largest emergency programs of that era, the famine in North Korea and the war in the Balkans. She was the Assistant High Commissioner for Refugees from 2006 to 2009. From 2015 to 2018, she was the adjunct professor at Columbia University of International and Public Affairs, SIPA. She was a graduate of SIPA in 1978 and was also awarded the Global Leadership Award by SIPA in 2013. She was also involved in the setup of Asian Women's Leadership University in Malaysia. I have participated in last year's international dialogue, and I must say I have learned a lot from the personal experiences of Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins, as well as the Q&A session. So later on, ladies, please grab this golden opportunity to ask your questions and let your voice be heard. And now I will give the floor to Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins.
Thank you very much. Your name is Lauren?
Yes.
That's a very good introduction, brief to the point. Thank you. I'm afraid I'm not in the best of health at the moment, so I'm coughing a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course, we can hear you very clearly.
Okay. So I may cough a bit, and then I may have to excuse myself for coughing, and then I come back. But can we try to make this 1 hour?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I'll try to get to the point right away. So it's my pleasure to participate again. Last year, I actually enjoyed having this dialogue with students from East Asia. And they're very sincere questions. So I'm always glad to be of assistance and to help young women find their way in this world today. And I'm very impressed also by the students who chose to join this leadership program. It means that you are a self-selecting group. You see yourself as a potential leader. So that's already a good start. Okay, so first, you see the outline of my talk?
Yes, it's included in the packet for the students. the
Okay.
outline.
Okay, first, so a little bit about my background. So you already introduced my career in the UN. So I'm a straight UN person, really, to be honest. After I graduated from Columbia, I joined the UN and I've been there since. Even though it's different parts of the UN, the UN is huge. So when one says they work for the UN, it could be anything. It could be UNESCO, UNICEF, UNDP. So I'm very lucky that I work for some of the top humanitarian agencies and the top development agencies. So 36 years all in all, and then I also worked a couple more years doing other activities for the UN. I'm a citizen of Malaysia. I'm living here in the United States because my husband is American and my 2 daughters are American. So a Malaysian citizen. I go back to Malaysia every year. I still have very strong ties there. So you already introduced my career, so there's no need for me to go through that again, except to say that, in the UN, it's quite rare for one to have the opportunity to change and to cross between the different fields of work of the UN, right? To work in development, as you know, it's different. You're trying to help countries, get out of underdevelopment. It's not war. It's not, it's not humanitarian disaster. It's the fact that they are so underdeveloped and how can they get on the path to development. And then there's humanitarian. Humanitarian is for natural disasters, war, people at risk of starvation, and how can we provide humanitarian assistance. And peace building, my last job, which was my best, I was there for 5 years. It's sort of a combination of all because it's dealing with countries that have sort of, they're done with war, they're ready to move on. The warring parties have come together and now they're ready to sit down and talk about strategies on how they can build peace, lasting peace. So we invest in all kinds of programs, infrastructure, as well as good governance, all the programs. So it's a combination of development and also not humanitarian, but post-humanitarian work. So, but as I said, I'm very lucky that my last position was also my best, and you guys can ask me about later if you wish. That was the 5 years I spent there. So I think to get to the point right away, what is leadership? I'm sure you all have that at the top of your mind. For me, this quote unquote leadership is not just about, being a political leader or a community leader. I'm talking about leadership widely defined, meaning you can be a leader of your class in school. You can be a leader of your community. You can be a leader of one of the projects in your organization. So for me, leadership has a broader interpretation because it's by taking those baby steps, if you wish, leadership at lower levels, and you climb up the ladder a little bit. That one day when one can conceive the larger definitions of leadership, it doesn't just come overnight. It builds over time. So so some people ask me always, but how can I be a leader? I'm so shy, it's not in my nature, So the question is it something in your DNA? Is leadership something that people have and others just don't have? No, obviously I don't believe that. Yes, some people are natural leaders. They enter a room and suddenly everybody, pays attention to them the minute they open their mouth. But leadership can be acquired. It can be acquired through practice, through, taking courses, getting tips from other leaders. So it's not a DNA thing, but I think it's quite relevant for us Asians. I'm Asian like you, because for some reason our culture has brought us out to be a little bit more, what's the word to use for it? Not submissive. I don't think we're submissive anymore. I think we're past that stage. But certainly the idea of a woman CEO or, is something still, unfortunately, still very prevalent. So there's certain tips for Asians that I would like to share with you later. Okay, for me, when we talk about a leader being at all levels, as I told you, for me, the definition is a leader exerts influence over others for a better outcome, for a good outcome, for some public good, some good policy, something that's good for the general population. So the leader needs a platform, needs a forum. You can't be a leader sitting in your corner somewhere. So you need a forum to push for that outcome, to push for that policy, and then bring about the better good. So this talk is also a bit about how one does that. So I'll go into that later. So as I said, leadership gives you the platform, in all levels of organization, from the classroom, from your school, the university, all the way to your community. So as I said earlier, you all signed up for this course. You've been taking a lot of courses now for, is it a month now? So, I'm sure you have some ideas. I'd love to hear from you what you think. But obviously, this is not the first time you are thinking about being a potential leader. Obviously, you have given it great thought and you're quite serious about the way forward. So my journey in the United Nations, as I said, the day I graduated from Columbia University, from SIPA, where I got the master's in international affairs, I went for an interview in UNDP straight from my graduation. And within a month or two, they offered me a position, which was great. So I worked in the Africa Bureau in New York for a few years to start. And then after that, I went to the field. After that, I was in Eastern and Southern Africa. I was in Zambia. I was in Kenya. And that opened the door for many other opportunities. I went to work for the World Food Program. And then I ended up, UNHCR and with the Peace Building Support Office, which is part of the UN Secretariat in New York. So, as I said, I graduated in 1978, long time ago, right? So I started working at entry level, a professional entry level at UNDP. So my first secret I will share with you that I discovered, with hindsight, is that when you enter these kinds of positions at the entry level, you have to be very realistic. You have to be realistic. You have to put it very straight. You have to find your niche, NICHE. You have to find something that you can really contribute, and people will appreciate it, and they'll see that you contributed in this area. It's something that everybody wanted, wished it could have been done earlier. And you're not going to be, you're not going to complain about it. You're going to do what needs to be done, right? So that's my first secret to share with you. Would you believe that when I joined UNDP in 1978, that there was no internet. There was, computers were only starting to be used. There were none of this Microsoft programs. So believe it or not, there was, I don't know when was Microsoft Word introduced, or even Excel. There was no Excel. So how can you track a program that's hundreds of millions of dollars without an Excel program? How do you track where the money is spent, what projects, what sector, etc.? So when I entered UNDP, this was done very much by hand, so it was not very accurate. It was not updated. And one couldn't see the total picture with nice pie charts showing where programs were, was it in agriculture? Was it in fisheries, industry? What sector, what countries were we spending money on? So as I said, I became Miss Excel. I mastered the Excel program. I trained 2 very smart secretaries, and the 3 of us just went to work and produced different ways to look at the program so that the bosses, the top bosses, could show that they had their finger on the pulse. They knew what they were doing and saying, and they could do a very coherent presentation, with facts and figures. And they really appreciated that. So, so to cut a long story short, the secret here is that, I wasn't I wasn't snobbish about it, that, I had to do basically very, manual work, but I could see the value of it. So I put myself completely in it, and it paid its rewards, because within a few years of working in the Regional Bureau for Africa, they sent me on a promotion to Zambia. So I happily went to Zambia, and I was a program officer. And then within a year or two, I became the assistant representative in Zambia. And then I became the deputy representative in Kenya. And then the rest is history. At each posting, I decided to be strategic. So think of being strategic. You are one of many people. You're one of hundreds of people in your grade trying to compete. Without being too pushy about it. Do not be too pushy and too self-confident, because people will hate you. But surely you can find something that people need, that everybody needs, that you can pull your sleeves up, you can do it and be appreciated. And at lower levels, that's what you have to do, to be noticed and to climb what I call this long ladder. If you're working for like a bureaucracy like the UN, even if you're working for a bank, the ministry, where it's a big bureaucracy, right? It's not like a small little family business. You have to climb the ladder. So you have to strategize on how you're going to move up the steps of this ladder. So that's my first secret. And then my second secret was, since I picked this field of work, development, humanitarian and all that, and that's where a lot of my colleagues made a mistake. Before they knew it, they got married. And, they had a husband. We will talk about that later. Had children, and then they couldn't move the field. They had to stay where they were. Whether it's in New York or Paris or Rome, wherever it is the headquarters is, they had to stay there. They couldn't travel to the field. And when you cannot travel to the field and you're working in this area, how can you possibly speak with authority? You can't speak with authority because you haven't been there, you haven't seen it. You can't tell people, you can't convince people that you are in control of the situation. So second tip to you is whatever field you pick. Some of you may not pick my field. May not pick the field of either joining the UN. Maybe you joined an NGO, I don't know, but you didn't pick the field of development or humanitarian work. But if you did, you have to go to the field. You have to demonstrate both your interest and your grasp, your knowledge and your grasp of the issues. So very important. Especially in emergencies, when I spent my many years in the World Food Program, and going to so many emergencies, in Afghanistan, Somalia, Kosovo, that was so fundamental, so crucial in sitting around the table and contributing to a debate on what we should be doing in these emergencies. Very important. So how are we for time?
It's about 25 minutes up to now.
Okay, so maybe 5 more minutes and then there'll be Q&A.
Okay, sure.
Because I want to leave time for Q&A. So lastly, I want to go like last year. I want to be very personal with you on, especially talking to an Asian women audience. And these are the tips. Okay, very clear, because I noticed this about us Asian women especially. And that is, if you want to be a leader, you have to be able to do public speaking. Speak to the public, speak to a big audience. We tend to be shy, so sometimes we sit in the back of the room. But if you don't sort of manage to be able to be confident and put points across in a public space, nobody will know you. Nobody will know what you stand for. Nobody will know what's in your mind about that particular issue. So how can you ever be a leader when nobody even knows what you stand for, right? So here, difficult as it was for me, I started actually doing, the UN has a lot of courses. That's a good thing about it. A lot of staff development courses. So I did a lot of courses in public speaking. But when you're in the proper forum and an issue is being discussed for which you have some expertise, I suggest that you jot down the points that you have that you think can contribute to the discussion. Jot down the points, raise your hand, take a deep breath, and state what they are briefly, succinctly. And believe you me, you'll notice that, provided your points are well delivered and they're relevant points, people will come up to you after the meeting, to follow up on the discussion, or the leaders in the room might notice you. So, here we have to be careful. On the other hand, we don't want to be over-aggressive. If you're over-aggressive, you try to dominate the conversation by raising your hand all the time and talking for too long, then people will hate you. Let's be very honest, you will not be popular. So the key is always to strike the balance. Strike the balance, but take that deep breath and go for it. But be sure, you do your homework. Be sure you know the topic, you've read up enough about the topic, you've thought about it, and then you want to put your point of view across that you think can help move the debate forward, that can move the situation forward. So very important. I can't even say more how important this is for us Asian women, because we tend to let, the Europeans and Americans, including the women, just dominate. They dominate. They have absolutely no shyness, no shyness, but we do. So very important for you. Number two, as I said already, even working, even in your first job, even at the university now, when I was at the university, I took on certain projects that I wanted to lead. We had a speaker series. We're in New York, so there are many experts in the UN that if you were creative, you could invite them to come and speak to, special lectures on very important topics. So I became chair of an organization that would create this, at that time it was called New International Economic Order. It was a forum for developing countries to have their conversations. So I became the chair of that. And again, of course, that gave you exposure and that gave you confidence, and confidence on how you organize these, and exposure. And in my case, I didn't even think of it at that time, but it gave me exposure to the UN top leadership. One of the people I got to speak, of course, I didn't know it then, became my boss in Zambia, a Yugoslav, So you never, but you're exposed. But how will you be known even, unless you take on this somewhat risky positions. I call them somewhat risky because you could also have a misstep. You could goof, and then. But normally, as a young woman, people will forgive you if you make a small mistake. People will forgive you, but always think of the balance. As I said, the balance of how much to push, how much you should make your point heard, and when is enough. When have you said enough? Then people skills. If you want to be a leader, nobody likes a leader who's arrogant and aloof and doesn't care about people. So very important. We, Asians, again, we're shy. It's not that we're arrogant or rude, but we're just shy. We're not, we're not embracing and reaching out to people. But people's skills are very important. You have to gain the respect of people. You have to show warmth, and people have to like to be around you, and they're not threatened by you. And that's when they see you as a leader. So these people's skills are very important. Calculated risks. There will be risks that you have to take. There'll be risks, but what can I say? You have to weigh all sides of it. Let me tell you one very clear case for me that I remember. When I was in charge of the North Korea famine program, right? World Food Program was in the business of giving food aid to North Koreans that were dying of starvation. So, and year after year, World Food Program provided food aid. We fed almost maybe half the population of. It was huge. It was a huge program of feeding to infants, to children, to breastfeeding mothers, to elderly. Everybody, it seems, except young, strong men. So we were feeding a large population in North Korea, mainly because the donors were generous at that point. Maybe it was generosity. Maybe it was also, to hope that North Korea will open up, that they will not be so secretive. And if you're giving that kind of aid, and my staff and I are going in every few months, they have to open up. So, so the North Korea program was a straight humanitarian, but we were giving millions, maybe even hundreds of millions every year. And then I decided I wanted to hold a conference. And at that conference, I invited an economist, a food specialist from South Korea, because this food specialist knows about soil conditions and how the soils in North Korea have been they're overtired, they're exhausted, they've been planted year after year with no rotation and all that. But I also wanted an economist, to really get a picture of what North Korea was really producing. They pretended that all the factories were working, but a lot of times when you travel, there's no smoke coming out of the factories. So what were they producing? Who were they selling to? And the statistics are all secret. The only trading partner was China at that time. So this economist had to extract data from China, i.e. he had to research what China bought from North Korea every year to construct back the production levels in North Korea. So come to find out that in the end, it's all a big show. They were producing very, very little, very little. It was it was a show. And the reason I wanted this to show in the conference to our donors, I wanted to show that not only were we a food aid agency, but since we were taking these donors' monies to give so much every year, we had a responsibility to show them that we are also aware of what's going on in the country and what's going to be happening in the future, and what role do they want us to play, what role do they want to play within this context. Okay, a lot of the bosses at the World Food Program were mad at me because she said, you have no business in the economics is not us. Leave that to the World Bank, leave that to UNDP. That's not us. We are humanitarian, we're food aid. I said, but we are the one providing the hundreds of millions. How can we understand what's going on, how long they're going to be dependent on food aid, and if donors open their eyes to this, are they going to be willing to fund it in the long run, or do they want other interventions? So for a long while, I was having a problem with my senior management that felt that I was overstepping the boundaries. But believe it or not, the donors appreciate it so much because nobody, the World Bank has very little data on North Korea. Nobody was producing this kind of a data to show what a pathetic case North Korea was in terms of economic production, but all about pride, producing nothing. and then pretending that the food aid, will no longer be needed within a year or two. And then 2 years pass, and then 4 years pass, and they still need it. So we had the responsibility to show to our donors. And that was really appreciated. That was so appreciated, that, the bosses had to apologize to say, now we see why you did this. So there was a risk of that. It was, there was a risk in China. Maybe I'll take up too much time, but there was another risk that was also appreciated in the end. But you have to take these calculated risks to show that you will stick your neck out for the right thing to do. And you have confidence that what you're doing is right and will be appreciated. Last tip is, don't be afraid to change your career tracks. Many of you, when you enter one field, I have many friends like that, 2, 3, 4 years, they change to another field, and back and forth. So, today in this globalized world, to be honest, what you know in one area can contribute to another area. So don't be afraid to if you're not 100% sure that you're interested in that field, to look for something the key here is passion. You have to have the knowledge, you have to have studied the issue, the knowledge, but you also need to have the passion. You cannot go to work every day, or even now doing it remotely, about having a half interest in that work. It must be full passion. Lastly, if you're interested in talking about later, I think somebody asked that. It's very important. And this is sometimes a bit embarrassing for the young women, your choice of a partner. I have friends, who just met the boy, fell in love, got married, and then they had no conversation about it. But then the husband had expected them to bear the children and stay at home, but they never discussed it. But she wanted to be the CEO, no less. So problems emerged, right? So in this day and age now, I think you need to have, the choice of partner. You have to be very realistic about in terms of your career path and his career path. Is he accepting? Is there a way you can forge compromises and do this together? In my case, I was lucky. I didn't think of it like that back then, but I married a university professor. So when we went to Africa for 10 years and everywhere, he could teach in the universities there. So he taught the university in Zambia and Kenya. And then also in the end became a consultant. So it was not a problem for me to go to the field, but for many, many, many of my colleagues, women trying to move ahead in their careers in the international field, what held them back was what was husband and family. They could not leave, and they got stuck in the positions here in headquarters. So unless there are questions later, that's the end of my presentation, but there were also questions submitted to me by Dr. Ma Sang. Should I go through them now?
Yes,
questions,
of course. Yeah.
The questions were about what can university students that you do to promote equality all around the world? And a second question is also about feminism. Are we going too far now? Do we have to be realistic in terms of pushing too far? I think these two questions really rely on the whole concept of culture and context, right? When you talk about equality and feminism, whether you've gone too far, whether you're talking about Sweden, America, China, Japan, or Korea, is totally different. So the context is very important for you to define first. I'm sorry to say that here in America today, I'm sure you've read in the news what's going on. The crazy midterm elections are coming soon. But the value structures of social programs, social safety nets, gaining more equality, without exacerbating this inequality in this country, which is so high. It's totally, totally different from what you'll find in the Scandinavian countries, in France, and many other countries. So first you have to define the context, and then within the context of what is doable, what is realistic within that context. In this country, we're fighting for that right now. We have proponents of bigger social safety nets, bigger and bigger social safety nets, and the others believing in a free, totally free market economy. Totally, you're on your own, free market. So there's this really unbalance between the two. It's causing a lot of problems, and probably will lead to maybe even violence in the days to come. Same thing with feminism. With feminism, and here in this country now we have the right to abortion as an issue. I know it's a very touchy point, but again, the proponents and the opponents are worlds apart. So the context is very important. Then you asked me a question about, was there any disadvantage to being an Asian woman working in the UN? Again, the context is very important. When I joined the UN in '78, that was when the UN was waking up to the fact that we were too much. You were supposed to represent the world, and we were too much a white male organization. You look everywhere, all the bosses were white males. So, and yet we were mainly serving people in the developing world, right? All our programs were people in the developing world. A lot of times there were women that we have to have discussions with on what the needs are. And you have a tall white man in a nice suit talking to them. It doesn't work, so they were realizing that we have to represent more the face of the world. And number one, and number two, we have to be able to meet the recipients of our assistance and to have frank discussions with them so that they're not intimidated. So then the UN went out with a affirmative action program, let's be honest, call it affirmative action, with targets, numerical targets on how many women they want in this level. I was part of the watchdog group, we call it the watchdog group, monitoring that these targets were being met. So in a way, I was lucky that I came at that time, because that's why I'm saying the context and the culture is so important. If you're joining an organization, maybe a very conservative bank, that doesn't have anything like that, then you're in for an uphill battle. And then maybe you can bring about some change, because you can also talk about women borrowers, you can talk about women businesses. But I think it's very important to acknowledge that once the enabling environment is there, the context is there, then it's easier for you to push and to have these programs implemented. So for me at that time, I don't want to sound too positive about it, but I found very, very little problem in terms of getting ahead as a woman. On the contrary, I think as long as I contributed and I felt confident that I was contributing, where if the boss was a male or female, didn't matter. I was going to get my way, and obviously with hindsight, it has worked. It has worked also, I would say, since we're talking about Asians, thanks to the SG at that time, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who was one of the most gracious gentlemen I know, who was really serious about promoting women's participation. Miss Kang, I'm sure many South Koreans will know Miss Kang, Kyung-hwa, who was the minister, but I don't believe she's the minister anymore in South Korea, was also a top leader in the UN at that time. Women usually play a completely important role in the family and all that. So yeah, so I answered the question. about the push and pull of family and trying to get ahead. You know, you as I said, our self-electing group, you're in this group of high achievers. You're doing your undergrad program now. Many of you will go on to grad school, and you're obviously looking for leadership positions. You're not looking to go in at a general service level. You're looking to go in at a professional level. So so I think it's very important then for you to be very realistic about family. You know, we want our families, we want our cake, and we want to eat it too. I did. I wanted children, I wanted a husband, and I wanted to go to Africa. Simple as that. And I did. I went for 10 years. I have 2 lovely girls, and my husband was a professor there. So I don't know how you handle it, but all I'm saying is you have to be realistic. You cannot just assume everything will fall in place. I think with those short answers, I'm now open for other questions. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins, for your wonderful speech. And I think for me, it's the second time to listen to your speech, but it's always inspiring to hear your personal experiences and your journey with the United Nations. And thank you for all the tips you've just given to all the young women leaders. And now I think the floor is open for questions. If you want to ask a question, please use the raise your hand button in Zoom.
Hello. Hello, Miss Judy Chen Hopkins.
Hello.
I'm the student from Shanghai International Studies University, and my name is Chen Dian. You can call me Emily.
Okay.
I think your speech really impressed me, and one sentence really impressed me a lot. It's called, the leadership never comes overnight. It's built over time. So I have a question. I want to know, are there any daily habits to make you become a more arranged person or a more confident woman to build your leadership step by step? Thank you.
Okay, good question. I answered part of that already by telling you, you know, when I first joined UNDP, can you imagine in 1978? That was decades ago. And you see opportunities, look around for your opportunities and take them. So at that time, you know, I didn't think of it in that way, but it soon became very clear. We were running a big program in Africa, you know, with all kinds of projects in irrigation, in agriculture, industry, you know, in construction. But we had no good way to present the information to both the board and the donors. So at that time, Excel was being introduced as a program by Microsoft. And I started mastering it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to, you know, instead of, you know, can you imagine they had the information on those little cards, you know, like a Rolodex card. You can't show a Rolodex to you know what I mean, right? The cards, that small cards that go around. You can't show that to a board or the donors, but you can do a PowerPoint with, you know, with spreadsheets. With pie charts. Pie charts are the best because at a glance, you can see the trend of what you're funding, the amount of money. And so it became an indispensable tool. And you know, that was what made the bosses appreciate me, because up to then, we were doing it manually. So that's what I meant about a baby step. Today, you would laugh. Anybody can do a spreadsheet. Anybody can do Excel. Anybody, even in high school, you know. But back then, it was you know, the fact that you can have a visual effect was really, as you can imagine, quite revolutionary. So with that step, And then several other steps later, as I told you, as you go up look at your career, not now because you're still too young, look at your career as a ladder, a ladder you climb step, you fall over a little bit, you have some pitfalls, then you get up on the ladder again, you climb up, then you think about what those steps are. For me, it was Excel spreadsheet, pie charts. Then as I went up a step further, I started taking calculated risks. I started inviting, because we were part of the UN, you can invite anybody, they will come. So I was able to invite the world authority on, in my case, North Korea. And I invited them and I asked them, could they speak to this subject or that subject? So in the case of North Korea, it was to speak to the subject of what is the secret to North Korea's production at that point? Why are they starving? I know the food production is low, so that's why I had a soil scientist from South Korea. But I needed the economists to study what is the situation of their economic production, because they don't show you that you're not allowed into the factories. You cannot see what's in the factory. So, and there's no smoke coming up. So what are they producing? So that was a risk, because that is going to, me, this young lady going into World Bank territory, but it's not me who's doing the presentation. I'm inviting the world authority on the economic situation in North Korea. And he came and he presented a wonderful presentation, which showed the board and our donors that we were on top of things. We were not just in our little corner providing little bags of rice and maize and all that. We were interested to engage them in the conversation of the future of North Korea. Just taking risks like that will make you climb a few more steps. Outreach to key personnel, key people in the donor community. Of course, in our work, I don't know, most of you may end up in the private sector, so it's not the same. But in my sector, the public sector, there's a lot about donor relations, right? Because our funding is most of it voluntary. Is voluntary. So you have to inspire the confidence of the donors. So you cannot be shy and stay in your corner. You have to reach out to the donors with information that interests them, that makes them look smart vis-a-vis their ministries at home. And then they will fight for you, to get the funding of why it's all necessary. So as you strategically climb this ladder and steps, it just, to be honest, a lot of times when I had, let's say 2 options of a job offer, I would sit down and write down the pros and cons of one job versus another. Whether I'll enjoy it or not, whether it'll expose me to new things I'll learn, and whether this will contribute to my stepping stone to up the ladder. Jot these things down. Don't just, be strategic. Don't just go with the flow. That's it.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes. Thank you for your answer.
Hello, Ms. Julie Chen Hopkins.
Hi.
You can call me Ivy. I'm from Shanghai International Studies University. Thank you for a wonderful speech and your responses to my answers. And after listening to your speech, I come up with another question about what you just mentioned as the field you choose to make your contribution. So when it comes to this field you choose, what between what I like and what I'm good at, which one should I choose? For example, I am very passionate about protecting wild animals, and I wanted to be a wild animal photographer or protector. However, I am now studying in law, and maybe I'll become a lawyer in the future. So if I want to be a good leader who's passionate always about my dream, which field should I choose between the field I like and the field I am good at now? Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Your parents may kill me for answering you this way. I'm sure your parents want you to be a lawyer because you'll have a good life. And they'll think that it's too dangerous for you to go and photograph wild animals, and maybe you don't get so much money.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they will be mad at me for saying this, but no. So I think you have to be realistic about both. You know, you have to be realistic about what kind of a life you want to lead. So you didn't even throw in a third option. You know, are you going to get married? Are you going to have children? You know, and because that's another path. That's another path that you have to consider. But as I said, don't be afraid to try something. If it doesn't work, you can switch. You can switch. In the meantime, you can also do both. You can be a lawyer, and you can do photography classes and go on a safari. You can go on, you know, you can take pictures for a travel magazine in Shanghai or in, you know, China. So, you know, you can do both, and then you can decide what fits you better. So I think it's very complex. There are so many variables. It's not just a straight answer. You know, I can't tell you, no, forget this, forget that. You just have to weigh each option. But as I said, in the end, don't be afraid to switch if you're not happy with that choice.
But we tend to be afraid of our ages. We tend to think that at this age, you have to fix your occupation, you have to make your path,
right,
and you have to set a family, have a child, sort of this. So, like, I myself would be afraid that when I'm getting older, I'm not passionate or energetic enough to make change. What courage should I get from? Where should I get my courage?
Well, it is, you know, I don't know what your family situation is. I don't know if your parents will continue financially supporting you if you choose the path of being a photographer, and your first few years might be hard to get a regular income. So I don't know what your family situation is, but I would say that in my case, I'm Chinese, I'm Shanghainese, you know, as you know, from Malaysia. So for me to tell my parents that I want to go work in Africa, they almost fainted. They couldn't believe it, you know, because most girls of my you know, my ethnic group and my sort of class, you know, they married you know, either professionals or very rich men, and they live in beautiful bungalows and mansions. And here I was, you know, going off to Zambia. But I explained to her that I really like this. I really like this field, and this is a golden opportunity. And my mother said, okay, go ahead, by all means, try. And then, of course, the fact that I worked for the UN and it was a good employer, right? They take care of the staff. You know, you are not in danger in the field, and they pay well. They pay well. So because of that, you know, in the end, she was actually proud that I was working for the UN. And then she saw that I was climbing very fast, and she became even prouder. So, you know, you sort of have to go with your heart, with a sense of realism. With a sense of realism, you know, if you know, how would you be a wildlife photographer? You know, will you sign up with a wildlife magazine? Will you just go to Africa and take pictures and hope somebody buys your pictures? You have to be realistic. Is there a way for you to do that?
Yeah. Okay.
You know, are you in touch already with other wildlife photographers?
Not yet.
You know, to get guidance from them. That's very important. But the thing is also
Okay.
China being such a big market. China, and with people traveling more, and Chinese are now the most traveled people in the world. And they're going to all these places now, not just Paris and Rome, but they're going to, you know, to places where there's wildlife. They're coming to Southeast Asia. Maybe there's a market there for magazines back home.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's already 9:30, so we should
I can take one
probably
more
end.
question, one question,
Okay.
and that's it.
Okay, okay.
Hello,
Can I ask a
Professor.
question?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, everything is changing. So we work on metaverse platforms and we have conference via Zoom, right? So it's a challenge for a generation to show our leadership via a computer screen. So do you have any tips on that?
Very good question. Very good question. You know, I told you one of my daughters is working for the International Rescue Committee. It's an NGO. And she works on remotely. She goes to the office once a week. It's totally, the way she describes the work is totally different. To be very honest, I can't even imagine what I would do in such a situation. My jobs was so much, you know, going in, spending the day with the General Assembly. Sometimes I go to Security Council. Sometimes I speak to the donors. Sometimes you know, a lot of times I go to the field. So I don't even know how working remotely works. So I'm always asking my daughter these questions. But that's a very good question. How do you show leadership remotely? I guess more so than ever by results. I would guess by results. If your field is such that you can show results. You see what I mean? Working remotely, let's say your field is designing a program or a project in the field. And you want to show that the program is working and they're showing results. It's creating more employment. It's creating, you know, a lot of good. And then you do an evaluation and it shows that the results are being met. And nobody can deny that. If you're a fundraiser like my daughter, the results are raising millions and millions of dollars. If she raises it, she's done it. If she doesn't, she has failed. So I know it's not so simple. A lot of our work in every field is process, not end product. It's process. But that is such a good question. I think you have to talk to your professors and think about it. Because the old way I knew of working was sometimes too much process. You know, as we say in American, too much bullshit. You know, you go there, you talk, you go over this, and then and I find that a lot of times people are not holding you accountable enough. So maybe it's an opportunity to show more clear results. Whatever your field is. I know it's not very helpful answer, but you have to figure it out because I'm too old to know that field. To understand remote working. I don't understand remote working. Okay. Hello?
Yeah, I did understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's the end for this Q&A session, and thank you very much, Ms. Judy Chen Hopkins, for your answers to all the questions. And now I would like to welcome the Executive Director of Office of International Cooperation and Exchange of Shanghai International Studies University, Dr. Mao Xiaohong, to express our gratitude on behalf of the participants today.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
Are today's participants only from CSU? Or are they also from the other two universities?
Also from other university.
Also from the other two? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the last question actually is from Sunshine University, right? About remote working.
Oh, okay, okay, good.
Okay. Dear Mrs. Chen Hopkins, thanks a lot for your sharing, especially in this special moment. I'm Mao Xiaohong, Executive Deputy Director of the Office of International Cooperation and Exchange. And you have shared your secrets and suggestions as a women leadership, your experience in the UN, travels to all of the world, which are very amazing and inspiring. I think all of us today are very impressed by your experience. Thanks again, and greetings from Shanghai on behalf of the Office of International Cooperation and Exchange of CISU. Actually, you see on the screen, and I'm sitting here in a conference room. Maybe you know, yesterday, the German Chancellor, Mr. Olaf Scholz, visited our President Xi Jinping and Premier Minister Mr. Li Keqiang in Beijing. Today, a side video conference of this visit will be held here in Shanghai at our university. Mr. Wang Gang, Vice Chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, will visit CISU and chair this dialogue. Actually, women leadership is a significant topic for all of us. I was also a young lady. Several weeks ago, I was transferred from the University Council office to this Office of International Cooperation and Exchange. I feel so lucky to have so many competent colleagues like my colleague, Ms. Ma Sang. I heard a lot from this program. She organized such very attractive, meaningful program for our young women professionals and with our partners in South Korea and Japan. And as the Chinese saying told us, women hold up half the sky. For example, in our university and also our department, we can see women hold up almost the whole sky. So today I'm very, very grateful for that we can, even though this program now only take place virtually. But I'm very grateful for that we can keep on engaging dialogues and cooperation with our partners in South Korea and Japan. So once again, thanks a lot for your sharing. I think it's very, very important, especially in this challenging time, and would like to find another opportunity to further our discussions and talks about this topic. And I'm also looking forward to having you at our university on our campus here in Shanghai. Thanks once again, Mr. Chen Hopkins.
Thank you so much. It'll be my pleasure to come to your campus. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Ms. Chen Hopkins. Please do take care, and thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.